It began during the heaviest snowfall I'd ever seen. The world outside my cabin was shrouded in white, the kind of storm that erased the horizon. My truck was buried, and the satellite dish had long since succumbed to the icy onslaught. I was alone, snowed in, with nothing but the howling wind for company. The storm had lasted for days, and I spent most of my time staring out the window. The snow seemed alive, swirling in patterns that my tired eyes turned into shapes. Shadows flickered in the storm, their movements unnatural, too quick to be mere tricks of the wind. At first, I chalked it up to cabin fever, the mind's way of filling the void of isolation. Then I saw the footprints. They weren't mine. A single trail meandered across the yard, leading from the forest edge to the back of the cabin. The prints were massive, larger than any animal I could name, yet they had an unmistakably human shape. I wanted to believe they were an illusion, wind-carved depressions in the snow, but they were too precise, too deliberate. I locked the doors. That night, the storm worsened. Snow piled against the windows, muffling every sound except the keening wind. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The shadows outside became more defined, their shapes flickering like broken images on an old television. I stopped looking after one of them moved toward the cabin, disappearing below the window frame. I barely slept, jolted awake by phantom noises. A thud on the roof, a scratching at the door. Each time I convinced myself it was the storm playing tricks. But as dawn approached, I found myself standing in the living room, clutching a fire poker, staring at the locked door. The snow outside had stopped, leaving a world of perfect, undisturbed white. But the footprints were back, crisscrossing the yard in chaotic loops and spirals. They led to every window, every door, before vanishing into the forest. Something had been circling the cabin all night. I tried the radio again, desperate for any sign of life. The static crackled in bursts, and for a moment, I thought I heard a voice. A faint, distorted whisper buried in the noise. Then it was gone, replaced by a high-pitched whine that made my ears ring. I turned it off, the silence more bearable than the alternative. By midday, the storm returned. Visibility dropped to nothing, the snowfall so dense it felt like the cabin was sinking. The walls creaked under the weight of the ice. I paced the room, trying to ignore the growing sense of claustrophobia. That's when I noticed the frost creeping across the floor. The air grew colder, each breath condensing into clouds. I retreated to the bedroom, stuffing towels under the door to block the cold. But the frost wasn't just spreading, it was moving. Patterns formed in the ice, intricate and sharp, like frozen veins pulsing with life. The walls groaned, a deep, resonant sound that vibrated through the cabin. The frost reached the bedroom window, and for a moment, I thought I saw a face pressed against the glass. Pale, featureless, and too large to belong to any human. I blinked, and it was gone, leaving only the frost's jagged patterns behind. By evening, the cabin felt less like a refuge and more like a trap. The frost had invaded every corner, climbing walls and coating furniture. The temperature plummeted, and the generator sputtered under the strain. Darkness fell, and with it came the whispers. They were faint at first, indistinct murmurs that seemed to come from the walls. But as the hours passed, they grew louder, more insistent. They weren't words, just sounds, guttural and raw, like the creaking of ancient ice. I covered my ears, but the noise was inside my head, impossible to escape. I couldn't stay inside any longer. Grabbing a flashlight and a heavy coat, I forced the door open, stepping into the storm. The cold bit through my layers, and the wind threatened to knock me off my feet. The footprints were everywhere, an impossible maze of paths leading into the woods. Against all reason, I followed them. The forest was unrecognizable, transformed into a frozen labyrinth. Trees bowed under the weight of ice, their branches forming unnatural arches. The flashlight barely penetrated the gloom, the beams swallowed by the swirling snow. But the footprints were clear, their edges sharp despite the storm. They led deeper into the woods to a clearing I didn't recognize. In the center stood a structure, a jagged, crystalline tower of ice. It pulsed with a faint blue light, illuminating the clearing in an eerie glow. The whispers grew louder, emanating from the tower, a cacophony that made my head throb. I wanted to turn back, but my feet carried me forward, drawn by a compulsion I couldn't resist. The air around the tower was suffocatingly cold, each breath freezing in my lungs. The surface of the ice shifted, shapes forming and dissolving within its depths. Faces, eyes, claws. The whispers became a deafening roar, and I realized the tower was alive, feeding on the storm, on the cold, on me. Panic broke the spell. I stumbled backward, dropping the flashlight. It rolled away, its beam illuminating the shadows gathering around the clearing. They weren't just shadows. They had form, substance, and they were closing in. I ran, crashing through the snow, the wind tearing at my face. The shadows followed, their movements unnatural, jerking and stuttering like broken film. The whispers chased me, echoing through the forest, growing louder with every step. The cabin appeared through the blizzard, a dim silhouette against the storm. I threw myself inside, slamming the door shut and bolting it. The whispers didn't stop. They seeped through the walls, the frost spreading faster now, glowing with the same blue light as the tower. Desperation took over. I grabbed the kerosene can from the corner and doused the walls, the floor, everything within reach. Striking a match, I hesitated for only a moment before throwing it onto the soaked wood. Flames roared to life, consuming the frost, driving back the cold. The whispers turned to screams, a high-pitched wail that shook the cabin. The shadows outside writhed, dissolving into the storm as the fire spread. The frost melted, retreating from the heat, and for the first time in days I felt warmth. The cabin burned, but I didn't care. I stumbled out into the snow, watching as the flames consumed it. The tower in the forest flickered, its light dimming before vanishing entirely. The storm began to break, the wind dying down, the sky lightening with the first hints of dawn. I stood there, shivering in the cold, staring at the smoldering remains of the cabin. The snow around me was untouched, pristine, as if none of it had happened. But I knew better. The frost, the whispers, the shadows, they were real, and they were still out there, waiting. For now I was safe, but the storm would come again.